So we will discuss about semester 6 DSc paper 3rd English Honours Literary Criticism, William Wordsworth's preface to Lyrical Ballads. You have already learned the history of English literature. In that history of English literature, you know the salient features of Renaissance period, classicism, Romanticism, modernism, postmodernism and all. So today we'll be interacting about the people, about the poets who wrote for common people, for simple man. They did not write for the kings and the queens. They did not write for lords and ladies. The person we are going to interact or discuss today is about the poets who wrote for the common people. You already learned the poem An Elegy written in a country churchyard. ऐ मेरे वतन के लोगों जरा आँख में भर लो पानी, जो शहीद हुए हैं उनकी जरा याद करो कुर्बानी. उनको भी याद करो जिनका नाम कोई नहीं लेता है, जिन्हें कोई नहीं जानता है. An elegy written in a country churchyard tells about that. Farmers, peasants. William Wordsworth also wrote Solitary Reaper, poor girl, working in the field. About the birds, to a skylark, P.B. Shelley writes, Hail to thee, O blithe spirit bird, thou now wert. Tintern Abbey, you have already learned the poem. 5 years have passed, 5 summers, and again. Nature is anchor of my purest thought, of my or moral beings. Nature is a teacher whose wisdom we can learn if we will, and without which human life is inane and incomplete. So, you know very well that your paper is about criticism and to enable you to be the critic. The critic of self, the critic of your teachers, the critic of your books, the critic of your poems, the critics of your society, your family, your parents, your government, nation, and even at the international level. This paper is to enable you to justify what is right and what is wrong. This paper is to make you to have the poetic justice. This paper is to enable you to understand from the within side. Find out the merits and the demerits, good and evil, in all aspects and forms of life. So, I'll just remind you about the Romanticism. When we learned in the beginning, I told you what is Romanticism. Romanticism is nothing but it is an addition of strangeness to beauty. An addition of strangeness to beauty is known as Romanticism. Romanticism is generally treated under the head the Romantic movement or the Romantic revival. The Romantic movement or the Romantic revival. The stress was mainly on freedom of individual. The stress was mainly on freedom of individual. Means you, your independence, your liberty, your freedom, and individual freedom. The stress was mainly on freedom of individual, self-expression, intellectual, impersonal, and artificial. The stress was mainly on freedom of individualism, self-expression, the ordered rationality of the preceding age. Augustan period was viewed as mechanical, impersonal, and artificial. So now we have won the artificial. You already have learnt the book Heroic Mock Epic, Rape of the Lock of Alexander Pope. So you are already acquainted with it, which is artificial. Belinda smiled and all the world was gay. The new preoccupations came to be sincerity, spontaneity, and originality. Originality, subjectivity, spontaneity, supernaturalism, and originality. These replaced the decorous imitation of classical models upon which neoclassicism, classes like Dryden, Pope, and Johnson placed much value. The turn now was toward emotions and inspiration, seeing the artist as a kind of prophet or a genius. Also came in the wake of such a general trust. You know very well that we have interacted already about Aristotle's Poetics. Aristotle was the student of Plato, but he reacted to Plato's teachings because he was a critic. He has the capacity to justify what is right and what is wrong. He had the poetic justice. So, my dear students, today you also may think that sometimes or after that, after learning all these, you'll be better than your teachers. But you have to justify. You have to find out your certain values, your merits and demerits. Reach to that level. Touch the sky with the glory. Go great graciously with guts and the glory. Romantic criticism serves as a convenient title for a body of critical writing with a particular historical background and certain broad features which define its special nature. The question of the definition of the term Romanticism has occasioned a good deal of controversy among literary critics. There are many critics who believe that in literary theorizing and imaginative literature, we come across not one particular romanticism but several romanticism. This point of view is very cogently argued in A.O. Lovejoy's essay on the discrimination of romanticism. This view is grounded in a sound truth about essential nature of romanticism. Romanticism places the greatest emphasis on individuality and subjective dimension of human experience. What Romanticism does? My dear students, Romanticism places the greatest emphasis on individuality and subjective dimension of human experience. This stress on individuality implies the autonomy of every individual and the consequent variety and difference. The cardinal romantic belief that every individual is different from every other individual. The cardinal romantic belief that every individual is different from every other individual justifies the assertion that there cannot be any one romanticism but several romanticism. This very fact, however, helps us define the common characteristics of romanticism. Viewing man as an autonomous and individual entity, as romanticism in all its various forms does, entails a particular view of human life and man's relationship and external reality. Imagination in this view is a mysterious creative faculty of which all arts, including literature, in a way an expression and which in the end determines man's relationship with external reality. To these common characteristics, we should also add the historical fact that we generally associate the rise of Romanticism with 19th century Europe. However, that does not imply that Romanticism was something altogether new. In fact, the Romantic impulse has always existed side by side with another impulse termed as the classical impulse, which also more emphasis on external reality and views art as a reflection on this reality. Towards the ends of the 18th century, however, we witness the beginning of an orientation of attitude and values, questioning the basis of imitative rationalist aesthetic and paving the way for the romantic view of life and art, the movement of enlightenment, and writings emanating from that is known as sentimentalism, strengthening this tendency. Blake's theoretical pronouncement and creative output emphatically rejects the mimetic view of art in all its forms. The shift is almost complete with the appearance of Wordsworth and Coleridge. And you already read the poem Tiger, 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 Burning Bright. The Romantic epistemology. The epistemology of the Romantic or the expressive theory of art is radically different from one that underlines the mimetic or imitative rationalist aesthetic. The component of the Romantic epistemology are: number one, the active projective view of human self, of mind. Number two, distrust of region. And number three, individualism. On the mimetic view, human mind is a passive recipient of external impressions and does not in any way modify them. Plato uses the analogy of a mirror for it, which faithfully reflects external reality. Aristotle uses a different analogy, but means exactly the same when he compares the human mind to a piece of wax taking on the impressions of a signet ring. This view of the human mind continued to dominate the thinking of the West, with minor deviations here and there, and squarely suited the empirical worldview of the 17th century. John Locke described human mind as tabula rasa in the essay concerning human understanding. Hartley explained the working of the human mind in mechanical terms, though his theory of association of ideas and Hume came out with a more or less plausible scientific explanation of the way in which this association of ideas worked. As he wrote in the Treatise of Human Nature, the qualities from which this association arise and by which the mind is after this manner conveyed from one idea to the another are three: resemblance, contiguity of time and place, and cause and effect. What Johnson recommends to the poets to neglect is the only thing of importance from the Romantic point of view. This naturally accounts for the fact that Pope wrote the essay on man. When Wordsworth attempted the same subject, he ended up by writing the Prelude, an autobiographical poem, the story of a particular individual. The projected grand poem of Wordsworth, The Recluse, of which the prelude was to be this first part, was to be a poem about man, nature, and the universe, but Wordsworth could not go beyond the prelude. Again, from the romantic point of view, reason has a limited role in life and cannot be regarded as an infallible guide. William Blake mocked at what he called rational demonstration, and William Wordsworth believed that the meddling interest misshapes the beauteous forms of things and amounts to a murder of sorts. In Biographia Literaria, Coleridge tells us that at a very early stage in his life he had found the limitations of reason and its understanding and its untrustworthiness as a guide. But in spite of these radical assertions, Wordsworth and Coleridge did not discard reason in its most exalted mood. What is the romantic theory of art? The theory of art emerging from this epistemology places the whole emphasis on the inner dimensions of the individual artist. So, what is that most important? Inner dimensions of the individual artist. तोरा मन दर्पण कहलाए, भले बुरे का ज्ञान कराए. The inner dimension of the individual artist. It rejects the mimetic conclusion that art is imitation. As you know, the definition of tragedy. Tragedy is an imitation of an action which is of a certain magnitude, of certain length. But, my dear students, I should emphasize or must say to you over here, sometimes you feel that your grandparents were not able to do what they were supposed to. Then your parents try to do something good or something better than your grandparents. Now, whatever your parents are doing, now you feel that you can construct the new house and break that old house of your grandparents or ancestral house, and you will have a new and innovative house. The same way, one period attacks on the another period and comes out with the new innovative ideas. Even political side also we feel and we listen daily in the television that Congress did not do that, but we are doing this. Certainly after one, the another comes with an improved form. So after this classicism period or the period, the romantic period came with a different salient features. It rejects the mimetic conclusion that art is the imitation, mimesis or mimetics. It rejects the mimetic conclusion that art is imitation or at least an interpretation of that poetry is a matter of wit, which makes up agreeable pictures and pleasant vision by combining different ideas. Art is not imitation or interpretation. Art is not imitation or interpretation. It is not the presentation of a basic universal norm or the denominator of a type, but creation in the most significant sense. Poetry is the expression of the inner man. Poetry is the expression of the inner man, and if at all it reflects external nature, it reflects external nature. It is external nature modified by imagination. Poetry is the expression of the inner man, and if at all it reflects external nature, it is external nature modified by imagination. The cause of poetry is not, as Aristotle thought, formal determined by what the poet imitates, nor is the cause of poetry, as the pragmatic critics believe, final, determined by the ends that poetry is supposed to serve. The cause of poetry is efficient, determined by the inner impulse and creative imagination of the poet. Creative imagination of the poet. My dear students, the emphasis on expression on the inner being made outer is the common denominator of the various definitions of poetry formulated by Romantics. Although they differ on points of detail, William Wordsworth defined poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. And he has proved this by stating that, behold her single in the field, yon solitary highland lass, reaping and singing by herself, stop here or gently pass. I listened motionless and still, and as I mounted up the hill, the music in my heart I bore, long after it was heard no more, long after it was heard no more. It's spontaneous. Poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. And he has proved that when he writes about the daffodils. I wandered only as a cloud. 10,000 I saw at a glance. When on my couch do I lie, that flashes on my inward eye, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils, and dances with the daffodils. See what he's saying. In the poem Daffodils, he's writing, when on my couch do I lie, that flashes, that means those emotions, those whole day activities, or the activity which has impressed the poet very much, which has made the poet very happy and overjoyed or feel an ecstasy. At the time of night during sleep, when he remembers, when he judges on the cradle of his heart, when he judges what is right and what is wrong with the poetic justice, then he says, after listening throughout the day all the lectures of my teachers, or after seeing all the activities throughout the day amid the nature, when on my couch do I lie, that flashes on my inward eye, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils, and dances with the daffodils. He's proving that. William Wordsworth defined poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings and emotions recollected in tranquility. Is proving spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings because he wrote the poem The Solitary Reaper. All alone, he was walking and saw a girl all alone in the field and wrote about her who was singing all alone in the field. Then he says, poetry is the emotions recollected in tranquility. And this line he proves of his definition, when on my couch do I lie, that flashes on my inward eye, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. It's stating that with the help of two different poems, he has justified its definition of poetry. At Samuel Taylor College, in Of Poesy of Art, remarks that all fine arts are a revelation of the inner world of man. Again, inner world of man. Most of the time you feel, की कोरा जाए, की ना कोरा जाए, दारुण मुश्किल. क्या करे कि ना करे कि कैसी मुश्किल है. एक मन कहता है कि ऐसे कर लूं, लेकिन बाद में दूसरा मन कहता है कि नहीं, ऐसे नहीं, ऐसे करेंगे तो अच्छा होगा. That means you are justifying what is right and what is wrong. That means you are trying to understand where you stand. You stand with the good or you stand with the evil. You stand with the right perspective or you stand with the wrong perspective. My dear students, one of the most important periods where S.T. Coleridge says, in of poesy of art, remarks that all fine arts are a revelation of the inner world of man. Shelley defines poetry as the expression of imagination, and Byron says poetry is the lava of imagination whose eruption prevents an earthquake. See what he's saying. Lord Byron is the poet of liberty. स्वतंत्रता के कवि हैं. What he writes, try to understand the definition of his poetry, and he has proved that through his poems. Lord Byron says that poetry is the lava of imagination whose eruption prevents an earthquake. Central to the romantic or expressive theory of art is a cluster of ideas which in practice are woven together. Like William Blake saying, joy and woe are woven fine with each other. But for our convenience, they are discussed. For your convenience, we are discussing them here. Ideas of imagination, ideas of inspiration, ideas of organicism, and emotion as the principle of integration in art. The imitative rationalist